Question is from Steve, and it will be directed to Francis first.
Yeah, kind of along that same line when it comes to confined animal feeding operations, do you feel it's time maybe to look at maybe opening this up to more local control?
Good point. I absolutely do feel that we need local control. About 1995, the Iowa legislature took away from local county governments the authority to have any control over where these places are sited, these confinement facilities are sited. And there's been effort ever since, but it's been fought tooth and nail by the agribusiness lobby. And it's just plain democracy. We should have local control. County governments know their area. They know the people's needs, and they should have a say in that. And so definitely I think we need to have local control. Now, the argument against it we often hear is really a red herring. People will say, well, we don't want 99 sets of regulations in Iowa. That is not the case. All of the local control would have to do with citing a facility in an area. It doesn't have to do with all the rules. The rules stay at DNR. The winter management plans, all these rules stay at the DNR level. This is just for citing. And so we can't let that red herring argument sway us here. The truth of the matter is that any builder who builds something out in rural Iowa, they have to look at the county rules for zoning, for plumbing, for electrical. They have more than that 99 cents of rules if you want to look at it that way. And so that's a total bogus argument to say that we don't want 99 cents of rules.
Well, I certainly believe we need one set of rules in how we site our facilities out there. I believe we need one set of rules in how we manage those facilities as well. And I think it is important to protect all neighbors all across the state with the same set of rules that we have as a statewide system. Because I believe without that, I think certainly just as in many other cases, you would have a real challenge citing any facilities out there. And so I think it's important to be able to have one set of rules across the state.
Well,
Go ahead.
okay. It's just plain democracy, and it is not 99 cents of rules. The management stays at the DNR level. And so I think that is the people in the local area have that understanding of the area, and frankly, they should be able to make that determination. We are talking about, in the case of confinement facilities, as I mentioned, toxic fumes that are going out across the countryside. And so we have to be able to protect people from that. And I'm seeing firsthand, sitting on the Environmental Protection Commission, some of the horror stories people have experienced. And many people who are against local control, when one was built by their facility, by their house, they suddenly became for local control.
Yeah, I've certainly heard from producers that have been demonized in some cases about what they were going to do in building facilities. And what they were going to do to neighborhoods. And as they built those facilities, others have come back and said, you know what, those facilities are not what others had convinced me they were going to be. I think we need one set of rules, and if those rules ought to change, the legislature has the ability to change those. Certainly update those if there's something that needs to be different, if the distances ought to be different. I think the legislature should look at those if they want to. But I do believe that we should have one set of rules.
The next question is from Melanie, and it is for Bill. Thank you, Bill.
We know that there is a tremendous disconnect in the American public between our food producers and our food consumers. There are cases of groups such as the Humane Society of the United States getting involved in government, getting legislation passed that has impacted the livestock industries in other states. Ohio is the most recent example. What kind of credibility will you give a group like that, and how will you work with all groups to bring everybody to the table and make those decisions?
I think producers are always looking for ways to be able to take care of their livestock better, and certainly that's what brought us to the types of methods that they have right now. For unhealthy livestock, certainly don't do well in facilities either. And so we've reached a point where many people outside of agriculture don't have any connection at all with agriculture anymore, and they don't understand why folks are making the decisions that they're making. And it's not just the way they read about it in a book or they heard that it was done 50 years ago. And so challenge is to be able to communicate those reasons of why we do some of the things that we are doing out there. Now, that doesn't mean things can't change over time. We can look at those. But I do believe that HSUS is one of those organizations, and there are other organizations like that as well, that attack agriculture to get rid of, in some cases, and it's stated goal of getting rid of animal agriculture. In Iowa, the $20 billion worth of sales that we have of agriculture, $10 billion of it is animal agriculture. And certainly of the $10 billion that's left, crop production, that's to a great extent depends on that animal agriculture as well. I think we'll have some real challenges as we go forward. Certainly, I think we need to stand up for Iowa animal agriculture. We need to stand up against those groups that misrepresent what's going on in the farms.
Well, consumers, of course, have the final say. They vote with their dollar on what they're going to buy, and so we have to listen to them. And a good example is RBST, the bovine growth hormone in milk. U.S. is one of the only countries that actually approved the use of RBST, only industrial countries. And just the last few years, about a year ago, very quietly it disappeared from the market because the consumers said they didn't want milk with cows treated with BST. And so the consumers are going to drive this thing to a great degree. And so farmers need to communicate, yes, we need to communicate with them, but we need to respect what their wishes are.
I think certainly what HSUS is trying to do is not work through consumers and consumer choice. What they're trying to do is regulate businesses out there regardless of what consumers believe. And in fact, as you look at the price of food out there, that we spend as a public about 10%, or as Americans about 10% on the cost of our income on food each year. The lowest 10% of people spend about 30% of their income on food. Many of the things that are suggested by HSUS and others as far as increasing the cost is going to dramatically increase that cost, and certainly dramatically increase that cost to the poorest of the folks out there that are having the hardest time putting food on the table.
Certainly, if we produce food in some ways it's going to cost more than in other ways, but consumers are demanding these things. And for example, in Europe, McDonald's is phasing out all caged eggs by the end of this year. In this country, about 6 fast food chains are phasing out caged eggs. So we need to look at how we're going to raise chickens, how we're going to produce eggs in the future, because 3 states already have regulations in place that are going to phase out caged eggs. And frankly, scientists look at it in terms of how humane production is, in terms of how animals can express their behavior. And in caged production, chickens really cannot express much of their natural behaviors. And so consumers, I think, that's going to be an obsolete system down the road.
Okay, we have 2 questions here from the crowd. Both of them are directed towards Secretary Northey, so I will let you start on both of those, and then Francis can respond. The recent recall of eggs was massive in scale, 500 million eggs. This has really brought a national spotlight on Iowa agriculture, specifically animal livestock production. That is extremely negative for our state and our farmers. As Secretary of Agriculture, what is your role in monitoring feed mills, and should a habitual violator like Jack Acosta be allowed to produce food for American stand?
I certainly wish a habitual violator would not be allowed to produce food, and certainly as we look at what has happened up there, I think the FDA is going to look very, very seriously about whether he's going to be allowed to stay in business and the kinds of things that were done in the management of that farm. I think that takes us right to the issue of what caused this problem. This was a management problem on a farm. It really looks like. Of course, FDA is still doing the investigation. They've done an investigation. They've pulled samples. They've not had all the tests back yet. But they pulled the samples, and we believe it could well be from problems within the feed mill. It could well be from problems within the buildings yet. So that's yet to come. FDA has the strong arm in this, in protecting food safety of our eggs. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to have a federal agency to do that. Because we have Minnesota eggs in here as well, and Illinois eggs, and Michigan eggs. It's important for the Iowa consumers to know that there is a food safety law that's in place all across this country. And that's why I believe the lead for the food safety aspect should come from FDA. We may well, carry out some of those responsibilities as time goes on, but it will be in conjunction with the regulations that FDA has, just like we carry out meat inspection and dairy inspection responsibilities in conjunction with the federal partners that actually have the command of those food safety regulations.
However, in the feed mill regulation, the Iowa Code does specifically give the Secretary of Agriculture the authority and responsibility to inspect feed mills, and this was not done. And frankly, I think we need an explanation why that was not done, because the law says that feed mills that sell feed or distribute feed to contract feeders contract growers need to be inspected. And this DeCoster mill had 12,500 semi-loads a day. If that was a caravan going across Iowa, it was stretched from western to eastern Iowa. This needs to be regulated.
With 12,500 semi-loads a day, I don't have a question.
A year, sorry.
First of all, there is a distinct word in there, and that's called commercial feed mills that sell feed. And the reason that we do that is to actually protect the consumer of those that are buying feed from others. And so our regulations are actually not for food safety. They are for protecting the consumers, just like we do at gas pumps. We test to make sure that you're getting a gallon of gas. And our responsibilities are for those commercial mills. We have been told, and we're actually still in the follow-through basis to find out if it's true, we have been told this mill does not sell feed. That the birds at the other facility are owned by DeCoster as well. And so they are not selling feed. And they are then a private mill, not a commercial mill. And so just as we don't go to every farmer out here that's mixing his own feed, we don't go to those mills that are producing feed for private facilities or on their own facilities.
So if the DeCoster feed mill doesn't sell feed, it distributes feed to a contract grower, Hillendale Farms. And so under the rule, it does fit because they distribute it to that organization. So the Secretary of Agriculture is responsible for that. And also the Secretary of Agriculture has the authority to make rules to cover loopholes. If this is a DeCoster loophole, playing a shell game, we shouldn't play that game with him. We should create a rule that would close that loophole.
So I think it really is important to find out exactly what this situation is on whether they sell, and we are working closely with the Attorney General's office to get the information on whether they sell feed or not. Our understanding has been represented that they do not sell feed, that DeCoster actually owns the birds in the other facility, and that it's not a contract growing situation either. And so unless you know something that we need to know more about the situation than what we do, it would be important to be able to wait for the information to be able to find out whether they are actually in violation of that or not. The other piece is certainly on large facilities or small facilities. We don't just make decisions on large facilities different than others because our rule says we are to inspect commercial facilities selling feed to others, not private facilities of a certain size